All right, so I've been thinking about Pseudodragons. They have a CR of 1/4.
Yep.
Ancient Dragons, Red Dragons, CR of 24.
Yep.
So, would you rather fight 100 Pseudodragons or one Ancient Red Dragon?
I'm going to take the Pseudodragons every time. I have a tennis racket. This will solve my problems. I cannot use anything in my house against an Ancient Red Dragon.
Yeah, definitely the Pseudodragons.
Did we not think action economy?
Oh, you're gonna hurt, but action economy doesn't matter against a breath weapon in real life.
You think you're going to make all those saves as well, though? You're going to be asleep.
I am okay with that. If I just sleep through my own death, that is the way to go.
That's fair. All right, I'm with you now.
Yeah, sounds better than being eaten alive.
It's a Mimic, the Roundtable Dungeons & Dragons discussion podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome to another episode in our conversation on dragons. I'm Adam, and with me today are Brad and Kyle. And this episode is called Draconic Creatures, Small-Scale Threats.
Oh,
yeah, you're welcome. We've previously covered all the chromatic and metallic dragons that you can find in the 5th edition Monster Manual, as well as Dracoliches and Shadow Dragons. We also covered wyverns, hydras, and dragon turtles the last time we talked about dragons. You can find all of these episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and dozens of other podcast apps, or you can jump over to YouTube and dig into the entire playlist on dragons that we've built there. This episode, though, is going to follow the format of the last dragon episode and outline 3 more cousins of the standard D&D dragon. None of these are strictly dragons for reasons we'll get into later in the episode, but they often come up in the conversations about dragons and dragon cults. And we can't continue this conversation without digging deep into the lore and abilities of the Faerie Dragon, Pseudodragon, and Drakes. But before we get started, let's officially welcome Kyle into the guild house. Hello, Kyle.
Woo! Hello.
It's been months since we've last spoken to you, and most of our listeners never got a proper introduction. Why don't you give us a little breakdown of who you are and what your history with D&D is and your role-playing games in general and all that nonsense?
The first time I played D&D, I was 15, I think. I was playing with my cousin. Unfortunately, that was pretty short-lived. He didn't live too close, so we didn't have many opportunities to play. And life, kind of got in the way, as it tends to. But it definitely left an indelible mark on me. And I have been in love with role-playing games ever since. I've always eagerly jumped into any game I could find since then, from Pathfinder 3.5 and 5.E. Apparently, luckily, I missed 4.E, though. So, as for role-playing games, I've been playing the Elder Scrolls series since Morrowind and love Fallout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you play a lot of like Final Fantasy or any of that kind of stuff as well?
No, I'm not as big into the JRPGs.
That Megan is still going to be.
I'm with you.
Point
She'll
that.
be upset, but
Yeah.
I'm with you.
How's traveling back from the Tomb of Horrors? Any wacky adventures or bullshit that happened there?
Well, let's just say that I'm glad I brought a lot of bodyguards with me, and my honeymoon phase with the undead is definitely over.
Fair enough. All right, so let's jump into these really quickly. Of course, also hi, Brad.
Hi.
There we go. So you get your voice.
I'm
in this
here.
too. Yeah. So before we get into it, really quickly, we've each got a different dragon subtype to cover here. Like I say, it's Faerie Dragons, Pseudodragons, and Drakes. The first thing that everybody should know is that these are going to be around civilization more than your average dragons are. First of all, Drakes are created by humanoids. Second of all, Pseudodragons are often familiars. And third, Faerie Dragons are usually around the Fey bullshit kind of scenario. And in the Feywild, obviously. They are Fey and not dragons, right?
Both?
Yeah.
I mean, they are considered tiny dragons, so...
Are they?
Yeah.
Good, because in previous editions, they used to be able to have both. You could have more than one kind of creature type, and that's not the case anymore in 5th edition. Like everything, they've streamlined it.
Okay.
But all of these creatures are used to being around humanoids, so it's a little bit different than your wyverns and your hydras and your dragon turtles, who stay out there on the fringes of society and don't often interact with intelligent creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So let's all grab a die and let's roll for initiative. We're going to see who's going to take us away first. You both hit mine.
I got a 16.
11.
I'm going last. You both hit mine, you bastard. All right. Who got?
I'll go first. I get to start opening us with the Pseudodragon. So, Pseudodragons. Small dragons, effectively. It's all in the name. They generally tend to look like tiny red dragons. A little bigger than would fit in the size of your hand, but if you look at the official character art, it's kind of about the size of a book. Like maybe a bigger tome, but it'll sit on kind of a hard.
It's like a
tome.
cat size, right?
Kind of, just a little bit like a small cat, though.
Yeah. Okay. They're tiny sized.
They are officially tiny sized. That's
Yeah.
correct. As far as demeanor and personality, they're fairly reserved. They keep to themselves. They really only fight in self-defense. They're not out to pick a fight. They're not aggressive. I mean, if you're going to put your hand into their territory and get in their space, they're going to fight back. But that said, they aren't coming out looking at you for a fight.
No dragon is a sissy.
Yeah, exactly. So they actually, as Adam mentioned, they're pretty common as familiars. They actually make excellent familiars. We'll go through the stat block; it'll really cover that. But yeah, they're excellent familiars, and as familiars, they can actually communicate telepathically, kind of through animal-like sounds. Like they'll kind of hiss like a cat if they're upset. They'll kind of chirp like a bird if they're, in a good mood, like a playful chirp. So kind of sounds like that, right? Animalistic little chirps and clicks and things like that. So they don't have a language. They can understand common, but they don't speak it. So
do they understand Draconic as well?
They do understand Draconic
Okay.
as well. Yeah. So common and Draconic are the two languages that they understand, but again, can't speak.
Sure.
So basically a pet, right? You can give them commands. They can understand that. And this is why they make such excellent companions. Fickle, which is, again, why you would kind of compare them to a cat, right? They are very cat-like in many senses. So let's take a quick spin through the stat block. That'll give us a good understanding of what they're like. So CR for these things, 1/4, right? They're not super powerful. We'll get into why, but not super powerful. AC, 13. They've actually got a decent AC for something as small as what they are.
Well, the way that it used to work in previous editions was your size was taken into consideration. It wasn't just your dexterity plus
Right.
10 or whatever. So it used to be your size as well. We don't see that so much now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just natural armor in brackets, or
That's right.
or if they are carrying a shield or whatever in brackets, right?
Yeah.
So 13 makes a certain amount of sense, but what's their dex?
This Dex is, yeah, we'll get in, but yeah,
But
15.
it's a plus 3
2.
month.
Yeah,
Oh no,
plus 2. It's
plus
only plus 2.
okay.
So to be a 13 AC, it doesn't quite line up, right? So there's some sort of natural armor in there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. I would assume that it's because it's tiny and small and it's going to
Hard to hit. That does
flit
make
around.
sense. HP 7, these things are, a stiff breeze will knock them over, right? They're not hardy. But again, they're not meant to be, right? They're mini dragons. There's not a lot to them. Move speed, 15 feet on foot. Again, they're tiny creatures, so they're not going to go
Sure,
very fast.
yeah, that makes sense.
But they're not meant to be on foot. They're going to fly. And with a fly, they've got 60 feet of movement. So
60
60 feet of
Jesus,
movement.
they freaking move.
Yeah, they do. They cruise. And which is, again, why they make such excellent companions. Or, familiars.
Yeah, because
Right.
they're going to. They're good for scouts as well.
They're very good for scouts. And again, with their telepathy that I was talking about that they communicate through, over that distance, they're going to be able to send a message back to you. They're not going to make excellent scouts because you're not going to hear, right?
Mhm.
They're not going to tip anybody else off. So we'll get into the stat block here. Everything's pretty average. The only stat that they have that's low is strength.
That
Right?
makes
And
sense.
yeah, you got
Tiny
a 6
creature.
strength. There's not much to it. They've got, like we discussed on the dex, right? They're going to have a +2 to dex. They're going to have a +1 to constitution. Int, nothing. It's flat.
Sure.
Which makes sense, right? They are
That's
intelligent
pretty,
creatures,
that's
right?
pretty
They're
that's as intelligent as a commoner.
right. This isn't a beast, right? This is
Yeah.
it still is a dragon, so it's going to have some intelligence.
Yeah.
So 10 for it makes sense.
Yeah.
Wisdom, even better, +1 to their wisdom modifier. They're wise creatures, which makes sense. That's kind of that beast intelligent creature hybrid, right?
Yeah, well, remember, in 5th edition, wisdom is not about how wise you are. It is about how you interact with the world.
With the
around
world,
you.
which is kind of that
So
beast aspect of
yeah,
them,
the
right?
perception is going to be higher, their survival.
Exactly, right? They're made to survive in the wild.
Exactly.
And charisma, flat, no bonuses minus. So again, no minus bonus. I mean,
But that's big. That is a a small dragon familiar that is going to at least be as good as the average person
Yes.
at figuring out if you are lying or deceiving.
Yeah.
Right? So
There's a lot to them, right? There's nothing, strength is the only thing that's really a hindrance to them, and that's to be expected. These things are frail, smaller, fragile.
Then they're not going to rely on it.
I'm actually a little bit surprised by the Constitution even being as high as it is for the size of them.
Is that just a dragon?
I think it's the dragon lineage. That was what I was kind of getting at with that is, I think something that size shouldn't have that Constitution, right? It should be a little lower.
Now, you said that they look like red dragons, but they're not tied to red dragons.
They're not tied. No, there's no lore in 5th edition that ties them to red dragons.
Do they have a breath weapon?
They don't have a breath weapon. No, nothing like that.
So not even fire breath?
Nothing.
They don't hoard gold or they're not rage.
There's no real ties to dragons other than the fact that they look like one.
We see that a lot with the other kind of dragons, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's reasonable, I think, to have that. These aren't baby dragons, right? We have young dragons. We have
wormlings.
We've got all that covered. This is a different creature. It just happens to resemble a dragon.
Yeah, well, that's what pseudo means, right? It's it looks like it, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar enough in theory.
Yeah.
So.
It imitates a dragon.
Sure.
So as far as skills, it gets a bonus to perception and to stealth. Those are the two that it's proficient in. If we were to look at a player stat block, we call it proficient.
So one of the things that they used to do, so I'm gonna pause you, is in the monster manual specifically, 99% of the creatures follow the format of these skills to get the bonuses add a proficiency modifier to it, which is loosely based on the number of hit dice that they have.
Yes.
So in this case, it's a +2 because it's such a low,
weak creature.
low CR creature, right? In later books, this is thrown entirely out the window, and they seem to get these bonuses and things just kind of willy-nilly whenever like the designers felt like it. And
I don't know how I feel about that. I'm kind of both ways on it. I like having it tied to something, but at the same time, it's nice to be able to just kind of toss something. Hey, you know what? This creature should have this. Let's just give it to them.
The only reason I bring it up is because when you're dealing with familiars, and you can give familiars sidekick levels and stuff too now, thanks to Tasha's. Yeah, which is fantastic.
It is. It's a very cool.
But these skills and whatnot are going to change over time. You're going to want to homebrew something that maybe is a little bit beefier because you're going in at a level 14 one shot with a Pseudodragon. You're not going to have 7 hit points.
No, of course.
So as you're beefing some things, beef other things as well, and the proficiency modifier seems to be the thing that you can reverse engineer a little bit. If you were to take what was a perception
and stealth,
perception's a +3,
+3, correct,
but their wisdom is a +1, so it obviously has a
proficiency of +2.
Exactly, right? So yeah, when you look at a 14th level character, what's their proficiency there? 5, I think.
Usually 4 or 5, depending on the class, right?
No, it's
everybody's the same. That's right. Yeah. Everybody's the same now.
So depending on how that works out, you can figure out what these skill levels will be, especially out of the monster manual. It's harder to do for Ravnica and Theros and Eberron.
Where they've just built it themselves. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, at least, if nothing else, this will give you a good place to start. So skills, they're proficient in stealth and perception. For lack of a better word, they're proficient in it. Interestingly, they have full blind sight for 10 feet.
Huh.
They have dark vision for 60 because dragons.
Well, because everything magical has dark vision.
Yes. Dark
vision is not an innate natural trait that things have. And people make that mistake. Like, why don't bats have dark vision? Because they're not magical. They're just beasts, right? That's why humans don't get it. And Dragonborn don't get it because they're not magical. There's no god there that is blessing them with this dark vision.
It's not being given. Yes.
Exactly. So Pseudodragons with the Draconic bloodline that they would have would have this magical thing.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Which is why Dragonborn have it, right?
No, Dragonborn are not. They're not from dragons. Oh, I'm just going to flip the fucking table. All right.
Passive perception on these guys, 13. Again, these guys they're not looking to start a fight, but they're darn well prepared for something to come into their home, right? So they're keeping an eye out. They're aware of their space. This all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Languages, we covered this. Draconic, common, they understand, can't speak.
Sure.
Don't need to dwell on that. They have keen senses, like everything that has keen senses. It basically gives you advantage on any perception check using hearing or smell or sight.
Oh, they get smell too.
They get smell as well. Yes, they do.
Okay. Usually you only get 2.
So these ones actually have all 3.
I feel like they were designed specifically to be a familiar and then got a monster stat block in the monster.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
They have magic resistance because, of course, they do.
Sure.
Why wouldn't they? They're magical creatures. They should have some sort of magical resistance. And we talked about a little bit limited telepathy. So up to 100 feet, they can communicate telepathically to another creature.
That's unique and different. It's strange it's 100 feet and not 30 or 60 or 100.
Well, again, we kind of discussed it with the 60-foot fly speed, right? They've got this distance. They're meant to be forward scouts as a familiar.
Yeah, but you'd think it would be 120 feet then, so that they could go out 2 rounds and
Two
still
rounds.
talk.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you're close to that. Yeah, I don't know why they picked 100 as a round number, but they did.
Yeah,
it's just a funny number.
It's a different one.
Yeah. So that's kind of it for skills. And then you asked me about what attacks they have earlier. So we'll get into that real quick. They get a bite attack.
Yeah.
And so that's a +4 to hit.
Sure.
Simple. And then it does 1d4 plus 2 piercing damage. So 4 on average. Again, CR 1/4, that's on par. What more would you expect?
These guys are not there for combat, right?
No, they're not. And honestly, you're never going to use this bite attack really with them. And I'll tell you why. Because one, they don't get a multi-attack. They just got one attack. Again, CR 1/4, why would they have a multi-attack?
Yeah.
But they have a second attack that they can sting with their tails, which is really interesting, right? Dragons don't have a stinger on their tails, generally speaking.
Not in 5th edition.
Exactly. So I don't know if this is a holdover or I think it's just particularly these guys, and there's a good reason for it. So again, +4 to hit, just like the bite. 1d4 plus 2, exact same damage. But when you get hit with this, you need to make a DC 11 Constitution saving throw. Okay? Should you fail that throw, you become poisoned for an hour.
Okay.
So poison condition, your favorite condition, I know, Adam.
Yeah.
However, if you fail the save by 5 or more, you actually will you'll fall unconscious for the same duration, so 1 hour. Now, again, like any unconscious state, generally if you take any damage, if somebody takes their time to wake you, right, a full action to wake you, that's how you wake up. But otherwise,
But this is not magical sleep. So
correct.
This can still hit elves who can't be put to sleep.
Correct, not by
magically.
magical means. This is not labeled as, because it's unconscious, not sleep.
Okay.
So, right, there's a differentiation there, right?
Yeah, when you are asleep, you become unconscious.
Correct.
But it doesn't work the other way around.
It doesn't work the other way around. Correct. So yes, so why would you ever use the bite really when this thing is an option without a multi-attack? I don't think you're going to throw it at a party. Yeah. And again, these guys aren't meant for combat, so they're going to want to use a sting to basically hit and run. I'm going to put you to sleep if I can and get out of here, or at least try and poison you, slow you down, do something to try and take your mind off me while I get the hell out of here.
Sure.
And again, with the 60-foot fly, they're going to generally get away from you at low-level parties.
Yeah, I mean...
Unless you hit it before it gets out of range, which...
Yeah, for the most part, you're right. I'm just thinking about this sting. Pseudodragons have traditionally had a stinger.
Yes.
They're like wyverns that way.
Yeah.
These are the dragon types that have stingers. And they both do, like with the wyvern, it is specifically a poison. You are poisoned and you take poison damage. Are you taking poison damage in this? Or is it
doesn't say so. No, you're just poisoned. So you just take plain, straight up piercing damage.
Okay.
And if you fail the save, then you're poisoned.
And that poison knocks you out. So
if you fail by 5 or more.
So
you aren't automatically.
So you just have disadvantage on your basic attacks and ability saves.
So if you roll less than 6, right, 5 or less, you're going to be unconscious.
Yeah.
6 to 11, you're just going to be poisoned. So disadvantage. Over 11, then you're good.
Okay. All right.
So pretty straightforward that way.
Sure.
So that's kind of the stat block. There's not much more to it.
And of course, if you level a familiar, you'll
get the bonuses that any familiar would get.
That DC will go up as well, right?
Correct. Because, I mean, we can kind of get into it here, but I don't see a lot of uses for this. I wouldn't throw this at a party generally as a DM unless, one, you've got a wizard or somebody who wants a familiar. Obviously, here you go. What better way to get you a familiar?
Yeah.
It's going to be a quick, easy combat, right? These aren't going to be a combat challenge, generally speaking. They don't live in packs, again, generally speaking. So you're not going to fight a lot of these. However, I could imagine if you have maybe a lich or just an evil wizard who's wanting to breed these things, grow these things, keep a bunch of them in a space and try and train them as kind of guard creatures.
Yeah.
Fodder, right? They're going to be able to, with the telepathy within 100 feet, with everything else that they have, I could see a wizard being able to have, right? This is homebrew stuff, right? You can have multiple familiars in this case where these things are basically all trained to be his protector.
Yeah, you gotta remember too that familiars they work a little bit different in 5th edition where they're not just the beast.
Yeah.
It is an actual like celestial spirit that takes the form of an imp or Pseudodragon or a Quasit was the other one, a Sprite.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 main ones, which means they have their own special boosted stats in the first place.
Yes.
The fact that you can, I read I think in Tasha's that you can apply the sidekick leveling system to familiars, which makes a certain amount of sense.
Mhm.
That seems like they're already powerful enough that I don't see the need to. You wouldn't be breeding Pseudodragon familiars. Pseudodragons themselves.
Pseudodragons themselves, kind of, yes.
And I mean, especially if you're gonna have like a Cult of the Dragon kind of shit. Where you're,
absolutely. Why wouldn't you have like nests of cages of these things?
Yeah.
I'm imagining like the Wicked Witch of the East, and these are her flying monkeys.
Yeah, but like they're tiny, but they absolutely almost like was it Saruman that had the crows that were, or was it ravens or crows? Doesn't matter. That were spying on everybody moving throughout the land and whatnot. You would have Pseudodragons doing that. Too.
Again, the telepathy of 100 feet, that won't work. But I mean, they're smart, intelligent creatures. They're going to be able to hold and retain that information until they can get back to you to report, right?
Or can they relay, right? So if you have a bunch of them within 100 feet of each other, and then they can send.
No reason they wouldn't be able to communicate with one another.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the telepathy.
Yes.
Are they able to speak through the telepathy?
No, again, it's the clicks, the hisses, it's the animal noises, right? So they're not actually communicative in the way that they can speak in words.
I wonder, they're smart enough to be literate.
Yes.
Can they? So can they read and write?
There's nothing about that, but given the intelligence, I mean, that's going to be up to the DM. I think there's nothing in there. I mean, being beasts, generally, you just kind of rule no.
But they're not beasts.
But
they're
not
dragons,
beasts. They
right?
are dragons.
So,
but they don't really have hands either, right? They've got the little dragon claws. They're going to have a hard time. They could probably draw a shape in the sand, right?
Yeah, or
they could draw a formation if you wanted an army formation scouting.
Yeah, they could tally with a claw how many of a thing that they saw or
they
something.
Could do something like that.
I feel like their memories are solid as well. Like they're going to remember you. It's not like, I mean, I
like
have
crows, right? They've got, what is a crow's intelligence?
or
a raven's intelligence. I'm sure it's close.
Well, according to the monster manual, their intelligence is a whopping 2.
Is it that low?
What?
Yeah, but their wisdom is a 12 and their charisma is a 6.
So what am I think? Owls then?
No. Ravens have that long memory too, but I'm assuming that memory is tied to charisma, which is why 6, which is lower than a human's, but higher than your average. Look, I got geckos.
Yeah.
Those things, they will imprint on people. They will allow a certain number of people to handle them. But if you have too many people that handle them, it stresses them out because it's too many different smells and whatnot.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the general rule is between 2 to 4 people, depending on the personality of the gecko. Mm-hmm. You have to let them forget one of them before you can bring another person in to handle them. So
it's not a first in, first out sort of thing.
Well, it obviously is. The first people that interact with it, and I mean, they're vicious little bastards too. I put my hand in there, and they know me, but they still think my fingers are food. So they're like, ooh, big worm, time to eat that. So that was my nickname in college too. Yeah. So anyway, I would like one of the listeners to go back over the last
compilation of your nicknames in college.
Yeah. The last 100 episodes or so I've been saying that. Anyway, so the idea of these geckos being able to remember people to a degree without having a high intelligence means that these Pseudodragons would have a memory of like an average human being.
Person. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and not even like a child, like an adult.
Right.
So
these are definitely much more intelligent than your crows, right? Because you think of them, knowing faces, being able to remember people, but
they can learn. Yeah. They know how to use tools as well.
Yeah.
They have apparently entered the Stone Age.
At the very least.
Yeah.
And also, they did an experiment with them once where they put a treat behind 7 different locks, and they had to do them in order to get it out, right? So they have the ability to use tools and learn things, not just remember them.
They can reason their way through a problem, right?
Exactly.
I feel like the stat block for Ravens is not high enough,
it's not.
right? So, but obviously, Pseudodragons could do all of this shit.
They can do whatever most people could do within the bodies that they're confined to.
You wouldn't choose them as a familiar if they weren't capable.
Absolutely.
Right?
However, looking at this, I mean, they seem like almost an ideal familiar compared to many of what people would pick, right?
Yeah.
You want something that people pick owls all the time because they have the flight, but then they're limited, right? That's kind of what they've got.
Well, but they pick them for pets. Okay, so the idea here with the Find Familiar spell, which is the
Yes.
one that we're talking about here, you gain the service of a familiar, which is just simply a spirit that takes an animal form that you choose. Bat, cat, crab, frog or toad, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, poisonous snake, fish. You're supposed to use the Quipper stat block for that. Rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. They appear in an unoccupied space within range, and they have the statistics of the chosen form, though it's a celestial, fey, or fiend, your choice, instead of a beast.
So this stat block, though, jumps out to you right away compared to, like, let's look at those other stat blocks, right? Is there any that are really going to compete? I mean, unless you have a very specific task that maybe you need a higher constitution or strength for. I mean, these things across the board are pretty solid aside from strength.
Well, they're not the regular familiar from the Find Familiar spell, right? These are the ones that you get with the familiar trait that you would get through a class. So you can technically have this familiar and summon another familiar as well.
With the spell.
With the spell.
Right.
So this is already kind of a beefier version of the one that you get for the Find Familiar.
Yeah.
Just because you look at those
Right.
stats. So
Yeah, I guess if they're not in that list, you technically couldn't summon them with the spell. So that's reasonable, I suppose.
I think it also depends on why you're choosing any given familiar, right? Like, are you going for a roleplay aspect? Are you going for just fun? Like, do you keep spiders in real life? So I want a spider familiar kind
fair.
of thing, right?
I mean, yeah, generally, my reasoning behind taking a familiar when I play anyways would be, one, you want a companion because you just want that, right? It's part of the character, right? Generally, if you're taking a familiar, it's part of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, you're going to take it for the tactical bonuses that it gives you, right? You have a built-in scout. You have something that's going to give you advantage in combat,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of different opportunities for a familiar.
Doesn't
this
the,
seems
oh,
check? Go ahead. Yeah, this just seems to check a lot of those boxes.
Yeah. The Pseudodragon too, it can share its magical resistance with the player as well, can't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. So anything within 10 feet, you share the magical resistance. And you also share senses within 100 feet. But that's, again, with the variant rules, right? Not straight stats.
yeah, but that's for when you have a familiar. And remember, though, that you're sharing the senses, and it has those keen senses. So
yes,
that's,
it does.
That's something else that
You're getting advantage, basically, on anything within 100 feet. Any sort of check you want to make for perception.
That's pretty damn big.
That's massive.
Yeah, that's big. I gotta ask Dave to give me a Pseudodragon.
Yeah, again, you're welcome, Dave.
Okay, so that's solid. I'm curious about how you guys would use it in a campaign, specifically from a dungeon master perspective of having a monster or an NPC and not a familiar. Right. Maybe a familiar to an NPC, but let's grab our dice and roll initiative. I got a couple questions.
All right.
I rolled a 17, so I'm
14
going to be
here.
answering my own question first. That's never awkward. All right, so the first thing I want to know is, are there any ideas for environmental or social encounters with this creature? And the first thing that sticks out to me is that I would use it as kind of a guardian for a riddle. If you have gotten into a wizard's tower and you need to find the whatever the thing is, the Pseudodragon will understand you, and you have to roll persuasion, not handle animal checks, because it's intelligent enough. But if there's a riddle that you're trying to figure out, it could either help you or hinder you, depending on what's going on, especially if it goes and stings your artificer or your wizard and puts them to sleep and doesn't occur to anybody else to wake them up. Oh, magically asleep, huh?
Yeah.
Right? And they just let that slide. Because I see players do that
You're going to
sometimes.
assume it's magical sleep, right?
Yeah. So when they go down and they're unconscious, and now you've got the barbarian going, I don't know, smash it, right? Like, you can have that Pseudodragon be a little bit more involved in the riddle process,
Sure.
because of the limited communication and the high intelligence.
Absolutely. It's going to know the answer to that puzzle,
Yeah.
and whether or not it helps you. And you're going to have to understand it as well, right? It can't speak to you, so I dig that. I had something kind of similar, but more guarding maybe a treasure. I mean, again, they're not dragons, so they don't have their own hoard. But you could still imagine if this thing found something shiny, or maybe another animal that it liked, some companion of its own.
It has a pet mouse.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if you look at the art in the book, there's a little mouse right next to it on the book.
I always thought that it was about to eat the mouse, though.
You know what? I was talking to my wife about this before I came over. She said the exact same thing. I was just like, oh, good, they eat mice. I'm like, well, sure, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely it could. But yeah, that's kind of how I pictured it is, it would be this little side thing, right? You're going down the road and somebody just happens to catch out of the corner of their eye. Because again, these things, they're stealthy. They have their own high perception, a decent passive perception. They're going to know you're coming probably before you know they're coming.
Sure.
And they're going to try and hide. But you got that one ranger with, perception through the roof, passive perception and, 17 or something stupid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there they are. So it makes sense that you would kind of catch this thing, and now all of a sudden you're trying to figure out what's there, and it leads you to this other treasure. Maybe there's a magical weapon. Maybe just a little MacGuffin for the party to find. Something little, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be something big if you really wanted it to be, right?
Well, I like the idea of there's a freaking dragon. That everybody's heard about the dragon guarding the horde, but it turns out it's just a pseudo-dragon.
Yeah.
Just a pile of gold.
There's another option.
I like, Adam, I like your idea with, it can either help you with a puzzle or it could give you a puzzle, right? Because with their telepathy, they can show you simple ideas, emotions, images, right? So let's say you're trying to find something in this wizard's tower, and the only person you have to ask is the Pseudodragon, and it gives you a bunch of images that you have to figure out what it's trying to tell you.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's good.
Or you could also use it as like a quest giver. So it's, let's say, it's a familiar for a wizard, and it's coming to you, and it needs your help to find this wizard or something like that.
No. Until you get the Murdo Hobo party that just sees, dragon, must kill, need scales.
Yeah. Normally I ask about battle tactics, but it's pretty clear there's not going to be one.
No.
It's going to try to get a sting in, and then retreat on the next turn. It's smart enough to know that it should disengage before it goes, and it's fast enough and small enough to get away up into the rafters where it's going to avoid you and whatnot. But do you guys have a plot hook for a side quest or a one-shot or even a main story arc with this? I mean, we talked about puzzles, but is there anything that's Pseudodragon related for something a little bit more in-depth?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, again, we talked a little bit earlier about it being, so maybe it is not the key companion, or not the key NPC, but it's a companion to an NPC. Mm-hmm. And you have this evil NPC that maybe your party didn't pass their checks, right? And they totally trust this guy. And he sends them on their way, and then all of a sudden, telepathically, somebody gets this little thing in their brain from the Pseudodragon telling them, don't do this, right? Again, now that you've said the images, I like that idea, right? Using images of saying, here's how you're going to burn to death if you go this way, or here's right? It can I can picture these things sort of having some idea of what's going to happen in the future, right? They aren't necessarily foreseeing, but they at least have the intelligence to know this is going to go badly.
Yeah.
And then they can show you a picture of what to do instead, right? So they're kind of trying to counter their own master, right? They've realized that they're kind of stuck where they are, but telepathically they can at least try and help you.
What was the alignment on these guys?
Yeah, so by rule, they're neutral good. Like, these are good creatures.
Even if they have an evil master, well, honestly, if I'm using it for an NPC, I'm going to sway it in that direction. By
of course.
Whatever if it's let's say, lawful evil, I'll have it either be lawful or evil.
So lawful neutral, or that makes sense. Yeah, I could totally see these things, right? Trying to thwart their especially if they don't want to be part of it. They're not liking what's going on. They have the intelligence and the charisma themselves to kind of stand up for themselves and what they want.
So you got me thinking of this telepathy thing, Kyle, where I'm like, for a plot hook, I would have it that there is a cleric. I'm probably going to go with a cleric, a priest, something that, or maybe even a warlock with a patron who's getting visions, but they've got a Pseudodragon familiar, and it's a Pseudodragon familiar influencing them.
Oh.
So they're the secret mastermind through these like cryptic visions to get certain things and whatnot, as this tortured soul is trying to appease a god.
Oh, I like that.
That does not actually exist.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just a Pseudodragon in the guy's mind doing this.
Yeah. So maybe not a warlock then, because you wouldn't have a source of power then at that point. But
well, a level 1 warlock could just something as simple as, I'm getting visions from whoever this is. I'm going to start up a cult. I'm going to whatever, right? So
interesting.
I dig it.
Nobody ever suspects the butterfly.
Exactly. Do you have any plot hook or anything off the top of your head?
Did have not really. Just the idea that it's trying to recruit you to find its master. I think. Can you force a familiar that to be your familiar if it doesn't want to?
Okay, so
Pseudodragons actually does cover this in the book.
Yeah.
Where they are like if they're not treated well, they're out of there. Like they
Yeah.
don't want to serve somebody who's not treated well. But that
you
doesn't
gotta,
mean that
you got to earn it.
But that
Okay.
doesn't mean that they can't be dominated. Right? I still see them as it's possible to dominate one, but it's not going to serve you
Yeah.
in the way that you
Yeah,
want
you put
to.
it in one of Dan's pieces of furniture, and then it's going to do what you want. Yeah, for the regular familiar or for the find familiar spell, I actually ran into that the last time that in our last campaign with Dan, he had a raven familiar who was who hated his fucking guts.
Yeah.
And would keep you'd be like, oh, I need you to go out there and scout. It was Zoltan the Raven, and Zoltan would go out and see something and then just get like annihilated by whatever thing. It was a high level campaign. So it was a raven that flies around the corner, just gets hit with the freaking breath weapon from a red dragon. And so then he would summon it again later that day, and it would show up and just be pissed. And this was an ongoing thing, and he had a character arc, and by the end of it, the two of them came to a general understanding.
Yeah.
But for the most part, this was a familiar that did not freaking like him. And so I feel like with the find familiar spell, that has a certain amount of auto-dominate perspective where they show up and they do what you tell them to.
Yeah.
However, with the Pseudodragon,
It's built into the
they choose who their owner, I guess.
Yeah,
their
they're-
alpha. I don't know how you-
who they serve.
Yeah. All right, let's take a really quick break. Did you hit record?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, as some of you have noticed, obviously, Dan and I launched a bit of an informal side project where we go through one of the Dungeons & Dragons publications at a time and determine the pros and cons and our overall thoughts. And the first one we did was Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden.
We went over almost every page, covering moderate spoilers for the adventure without giving the ending away. We covered things that interest players or may be useful to dungeon masters to get inspiration from.
I always love going through the monsters and the items and the player options.
I really enjoyed seeing all the different forms of the Frost Maiden and investigating everything about her frosty lair to her maiden head.
Dan? What the fuck, man? I need you to take these commercials way more seriously. I show up every time with the utmost professional attitude.
Ah!
What?
You? Professional?
Yes.
Professional what? Dick?
At least I'm not an amateur dick.
I don't... What?
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 What is your problem?
What's an amateur dick?
Well, I don't know. Obviously, by definition, it's a dick that doesn't get paid.
Does your dick normally get paid?
I mean, it should.
Well, I'm not sure that Canada's ready to reintroduce the penny, Adam.
Go fuck yourself, Dan. It should be getting paid in pounds, if you get what I mean.
You could pound it on your own time. We're trying to record a commercial.
Okay, anyway, Dick, we're going to periodically continue working our way through new releases as they come,
Gross.
as well as discussing some of the published material from Wizards of the Coast that has already hit the shelves. There's a lot of info out there for 5th edition, but not every DM or player knows which book to pick up next, or what to expect from an adventure module. After all, there's some great additions to the library, and then there's, well, Rick and Morty versus D&D.
This series is going to be sporadic and unscheduled, so keep your eyes out for these and let us know if you agree with our assessments.
We hope that you'll be able to use the series as a guideline for which books deserve your attention for your own personal needs as a D&D player, but keep in mind that they're going to be full of moderate spoilers for the adventures, and they aren't meant to tear into specific mechanics or stat blocks.
As we go on, you'll be able to find previous Legend Lore episodes in a playlist on our YouTube channel, or check out the episode guide to see what books we've already covered by looking at the post on r/It's a Mimic on Reddit.
Now, let's get back to the episode, shall we? Fuck, one of these days we're going to record a normal fucking commercial.
I highly doubt it.
Well, whose fault is that?
Mostly yours.
Disagree. Okay, so we've talked Pseudodragons. We're going to jump over now to Kyle, who rolled second highest on the initiative order. So that is Faerie Dragons now.
That is.
All the many different types and kinds of Faerie Dragons that we get.
It
That
is
can
just
only be
one kind, but it changes colors over its lifetime. Faerie dragons are one of the smallest dragons, only about the size of a house cat. They've got iridescent scales that change colors depending on their age, with silvery butterfly-like wings and long prehensile tails. These mischievous little ragamuffins love to play tricks on people, often staying invisible to watch the fun, only revealing themselves when they know the pranks can take a joke. Like most dragons, these guys get stronger with age, and with color change, gain new spells. And with each color change, gain new spells. but mature much more quickly and live shorter lives, reaching full adulthood at only 51 years old. They can generally be found hanging out in tropical forests and temperate climates, chilling with other fey creatures like pixies and sprites, choosing to build their nests high up in the boughs of trees like birds, and also using similar materials. Fairy dragons are tiny, chaotic, good creatures. In terms of stats, these guys are nothing like regular dragons. They're sporting a CR of only 1 when they are red, orange, and yellow, and 2 when they reach green, blue, and indigo, and violet. They're rocking a 15 AC with 4d4 plus 4 HP, but they are fast in the air. They got the same speed as a Pseudodragon with 60 feet of flying speed, but just 10 on the ground. So they are
interesting. It's slower than the Pseudodragon on the ground because it had 15. So that's interesting that they don't share that stat.
Yeah. They are definitely not strong. They've only got a strength of 3, meaning a -4 modifier in that category. But they do have positive ones for the rest of their stats, their highest being Dex at 20. They are skilled in Arcana, Perception, and have a +7 in Stealth, which I think makes sense for a creature that can turn invisible at will.
Absolutely.
They've also get 60 feet of dark vision, like most dragons, a passive perception of 13, and they can speak both Draconic and Sylvan.
And they can actually speak.
They can actually speak. As for abilities, they have superior invisibility, which means as a bonus action, and anything that they are carrying or wearing also becomes invisible until their concentration ends.
Carrying or wearing, I like that. I'm picturing one with a big chain.
Yeah.
And that is until their concentration ends. So the moment that they take damage of any kind, that drops.
Yeah. They've also got limited telepathy, but it's different from the Pseudodragon one. They can only use it to speak to other fairy dragons and within 60 feet of them. Which leads me to believe that these guys will generally live in packs or in close proximity to each other. And they also have the magical resistance, giving them advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects.
Makes sense.
They also have a once per day charisma-based spell list with a DC 13 save that will depend on their color and age. They unlock new spells as they mature. Starting at red, they get Dancing Lights, Mage Hand, and Minor Illusion. When they get to orange, they get Color Spray. Yellow gets Mirror Image. Green gets Suggestion. Blue gets Major Image. Indigo is Hallucinatory Terrain. And violet gets Polymorph.
That is an impressive spell list.
Yeah.
Especially because they're adding and not replacing as they go.
Oh, yeah.
So that's insane.
Oh, I didn't catch that. That's right.
Yeah.
In my brain, it was replacing, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Huh.
And notice how none of them are offensive spells, right? They're all kind of just made to fuck with people. For their actions, they have a bite attack with a +7 to hits and a 5-foot reach that deals a mighty 1 piercing damage.
They don't even get a die. It's
don't-
just a 1.
wow.
Yeah. Just a straight 1.
That's CR1. I mean, again, you're not meant to use it.
Yeah.
Just like the Pseudodragon, why would you ever use the bite?
I think it's a CR1 because it's so hard to hit, right?
Yeah.
It can turn invisible and it can also just cast itself everywhere.
Yeah, it's also CR1 because hallucinatory terrain. That's for the CR2
That's CR2
version.
at that point. Yeah.
The hallucinatory terrain will get people to walk off cliffs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like these guys are really, really fucky. Minor Illusion can do it. Mage Hand is going to steal your player's items up to 5 pounds, right? These guys are nasty, and they come in groups too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't remember. Are these guys actually Fae or they're dragons?
No, they're dragons.
They are
dragons.
dragons subtype.
Yeah, but they do hang out with Fae. So they'll normally be seen with pixies and sprites, and they'll generally call them in to their aid if they're ever
It
attacked.
makes sense. They actually feel almost more Fae than dragon.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They have earned their name.
Yes.
And now I also love this bit. They have a Euphoria Breath attack,
This is my favorite thing. Yeah.
where they just shoot a little puff of gas at one creature within 5 feet of themselves. And if the target fails the DC 11 Wisdom saving throw for 1 minute, can't take reactions, and it has to roll a D6 on the beginning of its turn to figure out what it's going to do. If they roll 1 to 4, the target is just going to walk in a random direction. And then if it's a 5/6, they can make another wisdom saving throw to end the effect. This ability also comes with a recharge of 5/6, meaning the dragon can get that ability back at the beginning of each of its turns.
Especially if you've got, like, I'm thinking a level 8 party could run into, in theory, about a dozen of these things.
Yeah.
And even though it's a low DC on that save,
It's wisdom. You can have people who've tanked wisdom.
Yeah,
For one.
yeah, your barbarians are in trouble. But even your cleric is going to fail. Like,
If there's enough of them.
if there's enough of them, and then by the time that these guys are recharging, if it recharges on a 5 or 6, some of them are getting it back every round that you roll.
I mean, you do note it is only a 5-foot reach on that spell, right? So it's not they can't do it from a distance. You got to be in their face, so you're already threatening them their space, right? This is a defense mechanism. This is not and that's the way I envision it, anyways, right? I picture it as a defense mechanism rather than an offensive.
But they're tiny as well, which means that they can share the space with
Yes,
larger
they can.
creatures. So that means, or with anything that's 2 above, which medium counts. So they could, I'm thinking in theory that's 9 plus the 5 feet above as well as another 9. You could have 18 of these guys attacking.
Yeah, they could absolutely swarm. Yeah.
I imagine them like dive bombing, right? Because they got 60 feet of flying speed, so they just come down.
Especially if someone's already
And
failed
go.
once, they know they're not going to get that opportunity attack.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So they're just going to hit over and over and over again. Hey, what happens if you fail this save from 3 different Faerie Dragons? Do you have to succeed 3 different times?
I guess so.
Once per effect, I would say yes.
That is how I would rule it too. This could get fucky. This is why they're a CR 1 and 2 and not a CR 1/8, right?
Yeah. I mean, but they're also dealing 1 damage to you, right?
But
So,
as you said, walking in a random direction, if you've got them anywhere near a cliff or up in the treetops or anything like that, you're plummeting.
that's a good point. Personally, I think it's a hilarious mental image. Like someone sneaks up, grabs one, and then it just goes.
You think you got the jump on it, and
Nope. And I also think they would make excellent dental assistants.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I see it.
Now, after a little bit of internet sleuthing, it seems that fairy dragons are drawn from the myths of northeastern European folklore. The closest I can find to real life lore about fairy dragons comes from northeastern Europe in Lithuania, Hungary, and Estonia, respectively called Aitvaras, Lederic, and Pisushans. And before you ask, no, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They also have a few other names, but I think it's best for everyone if I avoided butchering them. The general consensus is that they are born from chicken eggs, black chicken eggs specifically.
Okay.
So
Hold
maybe
on. Eggs from black chickens or black eggs from chickens?
both. It depends on where you're going for your lore.
Mhm.
And they can take forms ranging anywhere from a flaming bird, dragon, or fire in the shape and clothing of a man. And they generally attach themselves to the households that birthed them, bringing both good and ill favor, making their owners rich, but often at the expense of their neighbors.
So
like
that's the
that.
chaotic good
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So these things are kind of a blessing with an asterisk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you piss them off, they will burn your house down. So,
So
Or your house might just burn down just because of ill luck.
well, and that's just Fae for you.
Yeah.
So I really like these. I like how D&D has kind of pulled that flavor over. I also like that they're not familiars.
Yes.
I like that they're a little bit more wild and chaotic, and they feel really Fae-like.
Yeah, the Pseudodragon was clearly built for it. This is clearly built to be autonomous.
Yeah, we've seen fairy dragons in previous editions as well. Like they've been around for a while, and I prefer this version of them better than previous editions, just because it feels like they feel almost like they're more of a role playing or an environmental scenario than an actual combat encounter. Right?
definitely.
Absolutely. It's the same with the Pseudodragon, right? Again, not built. These things aren't built for combat. They're not built to do massive damage and take your party down.
Yeah.
They're meant to mess with your party or to interact with your party in some way.
Okay, so let's grab our dice because I have some questions.
All right.
All right.
I got a nat 20.
I had a 4, but thank you, Kyle, for bumping me to an 18. And you
You're
get the
going
17.
third.
You're going third with a 17.
Yeah.
Jesus. Well, once again, I'm answering my own question. Okay, environmental and social encounter opportunities here. Clearly, these guys are going to be flitting all around the Feywild. I have actually used these guys to great effect in my own campaign, where my players went to the Feywild, and the Faerie Dragons actually approached the Dragonborn and said, "Oh, you are more of dragon, or you are more of man than you are of dragon." And they're like, "What?
Yeah.
You are more of man than of dragon." And then said, "We are more dragon. We are more of dragon than of Fey." And then they cocooned. I homebrewed this. They cocooned, and they came out with like fairy wings instead of the silvery wings, and their abilities, their stats are a little bit different, and they sparkled, and now we're more of Fey. Would you like to be more of dragon? We can teach you how.
Yeah.
And that is how our Dragonborn got a tail and wings.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So I really like Faerie Dragons being this chaotic good, and they straddle the line between the two and kind of waffle back and forth. So between the idea of a fickle dragon or a fickle Fey, which I really love Faerie Dragons. I would use them all the time. And you're right, the Euphoria Breath is hilarious. And I just want an artificer to capture it and be able to release it.
Yeah.
Right?
Weaponize
The Euphoria. Yeah.
I dig it. For me, I picture these guys in a way almost guarding, protecting, and disguising a portal to the Feywild.
Oh, yeah.
Like these guys are just kind of hanging out in the area of the portal,
Okay.
and they're kind of judging who's worthy of entering and who's not. Right? Their whole job is to disguise, to hide, to manipulate anyone who's trying to go through the portal. And so these guys are they're judging you, right? You're coming up, they're going to ask you maybe some riddles, they're going to play tricks on you, and they're basically going to see how you respond. And if they like what they see, here, we'll guide you right to the portal. If they don't like what they see, well, yeah, sure, the portal's that way.
And then they walk you
it's
off the
another
cliff.
trick. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I got
You just gotta have faith, right? Jump, and you'll go through it.
I got a question which has never come up before as well. In your opinion, so Mage Hand can only lift to 5 pounds.
Yes.
If you have 18 Faerie Dragons and they all cast Mage Hand at the same
5
time,
pounds each? Yes.
can you lift something 90 pounds?
I say yes.
Can a bunch of mage hands occupy the same space?
But they don't need to if they're
If
picking
it's
up a
a big
halfling, like they're grabbing by like pant legs and hood and scruff of the neck and
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Like they could occupy the same 5 foot square, I would say. Maybe not the same space, but
I absolutely love the idea of these guys yeeting fucking halfling off a fucking cliff.
rule of fun. I say yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
there is nothing specifically rules as written to contradict it.
Then they go and
But
grab
that's-
the Goliath and just nothing
happens. Yeah. I mean, because you're going to need a lot of these to lift anything of any measure, right?
Yeah.
So I say yes.
Well, aren't gnomes like 15 pounds or something like ridiculously?
Yeah.
They're tiny. Yeah.
This could be really
Technically not
fun.
tiny, but yes.
Oh, and then you could have like the gnome actually befriend the Faerie Dragons, and suddenly he's got an invisible fly speed for no reason,
Yep.
just 'cause they pick him up and wave him around.
Absolutely.
Kyle, do you have any insights on a social or environmental encounter with these guys?
Yeah, I think they would be playing for fun, like they would want to play a trick on you, with using the mage hand to lift somebody up. Oh, you want to come see my nest? And then just like lifting them up just to scare the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Just for like, I don't know. I don't really imagine them killing anything or trying to kill anything unless
They are
provoked.
good. They're still good creatures, generally speaking. So
Yeah.
unless they have a reason to kill somebody, I don't think they're going to do it just for pleasure.
Well, chaotic good though, so that
Yeah,
comes
but-
with a grain of salt.
Yeah, for social encounters, I imagine just fucking with my party and trying to get them to see if they can figure out what is going on and what is affecting them. So, like,
If they're
your
invisible
Goliath,
and they're
Goliath
doing-
trips, yeah. Or,
Yeah, well, they've got so many ways of manipulating your mind as well, or
Mm.
what you're seeing anyways, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there to really mess with the party.
yeah, especially suggestion.
It is worth pointing out though that when its concentration ends, then it drops its invisibility. So a lot of the other things that require concentration can't be doubled up.
Oh.
So you're not going to be messing around too much with some of the illusion magic.
But if you got a
And
pack
whatnot.
of them, right? Each
If you-
one casting a different concentration spell,
Hmm.
right? You're going to be able to do a lot of different things. Especially, you can have variation in the color of these things, right? They don't all have to be the same.
But it can't turn other things invisible, right?
Right,
So
yes.
so you could have one that's there talking to the party while all this other crazy shit is happening around them.
Yes.
And they may think there's only one Faerie Dragon there. So they can mask their numbers with it. But you're not going to have one that's able to cast this invisibility on itself and then other
Are there
things as
verbal or somatic components to
Well-
these spells? Like, they're innate. It's innate spell casting, right? It's at will. But does it require any sort of? Because if they can do it, without indicating that they're casting a spell, you could do a lot of funky stuff with that.
Well, it says that specifically it does not take material components, but it doesn't say anything about verbal or
Yeah.
somatic. So I assume that they still have to move and chirp and do their own.
But if their fey creature is going to be moving around wildly anyways, it may be hard to differ unless somebody's intentionally trying to read their body behavior to see if they can tell that they're casting spells.
Well, it does say in the Greater Invisibility that whatever they're carrying is also invisible. So could
Correct.
they carry another Faerie Dragon?
Oh, see, now you're just getting.
Oh my goodness!
It specifically says any equipment that
Okay.
they're.
Yes.
Yeah, I think. Jesus. It's just like
We got that player.
Just like 15 freaking Faerie Dragons.
I'm starting to understand Dave a little better.
Yeah. That's why he hates his players.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys have any battle tactics? All right. Let's think about combat for a minute with these guys. For me personally, again, they are going to retreat and escape and harass from a distance, right? You are going to turn the corner and see the boulder rolling down at you, but there's not actually
no
a
boulder.
boulder,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be that kind of thing. They don't have really any offensive spells, like you said. Their bite is
One damage.
super weak,
Yeah.
right? So they are there to create chaos and flee.
Mhm.
That's what I see, especially with the 60-foot movement
Yeah.
for the fly speed. What would it take to actually launch into combat with these guys?
Yeah, I'd really struggle with that, right? Unless they're really trying to defend something that they're willing to die for, right? We've talked about this with intelligent creatures, right? That most creatures are going to want to live another day and
Absolutely.
are willing to bide their time. These guys are no different. So unless it's absolutely dire that they protect whatever they are protecting and it must survive, they're not going to stick around.
I really would run these guys like NPCs,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Like they've got the intelligence and the wisdom and charisma to back that up.
Yeah. And they'll do anything to stay out of a fight, right? They'll smooth talk their way. They'll deceive you. They'll do whatever they can to avoid the fight. And when that fight starts, they're running unless they absolutely must stay in that fight to the death.
They're pretty easy to win over too. Like all you have to do is give them a little bit of food, maybe a bauble, right? And then they're kind of on your side.
That's really Fey-like as well. I would have them follow a lot of the weird Fey rules and stuff as well. Like
Absolutely.
if you approach at sundown wearing your shoes, then it means this, right? As opposed to that. And like
Absolutely.
the weird kind of stuff where they're not interested in your gold,
Yeah.
except that it's shiny. It's weird that you put someone's face on it. That's kind of neat, but I don't need 10 of them. I only need the one,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same face over and over. Oh, you limited humans, right? So I really do see them as being very Fey-like.
They're more Fey than Dragon to me, right? To me, they're Dragon in form. They're Fey in every other way.
Yeah. Even their breath weapon is Fey-like.
Yes.
So do you guys have any plot hooks or side quests or one-shots or stories revolving around these guys? Anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I got one. So I imagine them as like an unreliable guide. So when you go into a dungeon or a castle or a cave and they're like, oh, follow me, I'm going to take you somewhere. And sometimes they'll take you to treasure. Sometimes they'll take you to ambushes, traps, right? Like, or sometimes they'll just disappear, right? Like they'll bring you into a place with 100 doors and then just disappear.
I also like the idea that they would like lead you down. They know that there is a freaking spike trap, and they lead you down. They're like, no, you don't need a torch. It's okay. Just another couple feet. And you fall in. And they're like, gotcha. Yeah. Right. Like, that's a lot of fun.
They don't have any concept that you're even going to die, right? To them, it's just like, I made you do this thing that I wanted you to do.
Yeah, because they are chaotic and so Fey-like, you could really lean into that shit, which is fun.
Yeah. For me, I see them more as a way into, say, hags aren't really a good fit, but maybe there's some sort of master in the Feywild.
Oh, you're talking about the Sealy Court?
Yeah, something like that, where they're looking for adventure. They need somebody to do their some dirty work for them or to retrieve something for them. And these guys are the ones who are retrieving the party, right? They're on the hunt for somebody. outside of the Feywild because they need some outside help. And so they're looking, they find you, they judge you worthy, they bring you through. And yeah, there's going to be a ton of mischief on the way to getting you to where you need to be. But ultimately, they've been given a mission from, the Sealy Court's perfect to bring you in.
Honestly, I don't know about a side quest or a plot hook or anything. I would have this guy be a merchant. Something, a merchant of small things like herbs or something, because they're using Mage Hand to move stuff around.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine them sitting in like a store window, like looking up as there's like the sign is moving and stuff. They're casting their illusion magic and whatnot to like lure people in, and then they're going to trade with people, but it's not for money.
I was going to say, what do they want?
It depends what time of day it is, right? Like, have they eaten in the last hour? Yes, then they might want something different, right? So, what do you got?
Yeah.
Right, and so that might be something that's a little bit more fun for them because they are not necessarily going to be in a shop in town. This is going to be when your guys are out in the middle of nowhere, like, hey, we are out of health potions. We have absolutely no resources left. We're screwed. Nobody has survival as a skill. Yeah. How are we going to get through this? And all of a sudden, a Faerie Dragon shows up and is like, you guys want to check out my wares? It's just a bunch of stumps in a ring with different like mushrooms and shit on it. And be like, one of these will heal you, and I will tell you which one. If right. So
I like that.
And so that's kind of how I would use a Faerie Dragon, just as an NPC that's not quite an NPC. That's memorable too. Yeah. And then I can also have them just show up in random places throughout the campaign whenever
the bonus
like a reoccurring character.
Yeah. Show up wherever they need to be.
That. Yeah.
Any final thoughts about either the Pseudodragon or the Faerie Dragon before we move on? Because these are both tiny creatures that serve nearly the same purpose as far as non-combat social encounters, potentially allies to the party. Do we have any final thoughts about them before we move forward?
No, I think I'm good with that. Again, Pseudodragons I see again more as familiars. They're not. I don't see them as much of an environmental thing. I think they were really clearly built for players to have a familiar.
Yeah, whereas Faerie
Dragons are very much built the opposite way, where they're great for all sorts of shenanigans. But yeah, that's it.
All right, so then if we're done on these guys, before we get into a very different kind of dragon cousin here, Brad, do you have a shout out or anything that you want to say to the people now that you're back in the guild house?
Well, one, it's good to be back in the guild house, recording remotely. I mean, I said this in the Tiefling episode as well, but it's just not the same. I miss the banter. I'm so glad to have it back. And with that, I'm going to have a little DM tip for you here. Get in contact with other DMs. Don't DM by yourself. Your players are great to bounce things off of, but bounce ideas off of other DMs. There's no better way to grow your portfolio, to grow your skill set, to learn new things than talking to other people who have dealt with similar issues in totally different ways, because you might just find a fix for something that you've been struggling with. So get in community, find a Discord server, tons of DMs on Instagram. But yeah, that's what I say. Talk to other DMs.
You can also reach out to us at Instagram, Facebook, and r/itsamimic on Reddit. You can also feel free to mail us any questions at info@itsamimic.com.
Yep. And remember, we're always taking mailbag questions, and we have already filled up the next round, which is going to come out in September.
Only one round?
Oh my God. We have so many freaking mailbag questions that are old, and we've got new ones sitting in the chamber to come in.
But don't be afraid to send them, because that doesn't mean you won't make the cut.
Oh yeah, we select them at random, which ones will go onto the lists as well.
So also don't be offended if we missed your question, because...
No, you know what? Take offense. I don't care.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's jump into the last quote-unquote cousin of dragons. Last time we talked about them, I mentioned how wyverns often get mistaken for dragons, but they're not the only ones. The other creature that often gets misnamed is the drake. Surprisingly, unlike wyverns, this is a fairly modern mistake that we can thank a little-known author named J.R.R. Tolkien, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, for adding the words drake and worm, spelled with a Y, to the conversation on dragons. Despite the fact that the word drake apparently comes from the Latin word draco, for dragon, and it has no relation to the male duck, the D&D drakes are closer to ducks than dragons in their level of intelligence and overall threat rating. However, they're not to be taken lightly. In other general lore, drakes are merely lesser dragons. either not yet mature enough to be considered a full dragon, or simply a lesser draconic being like a wyvern. In previous editions, drakes could be any size from tiny to large, they could have wings or not, or walk on their hind legs like a velociraptor, or on all fours like Dave on a Saturday night. But in 5th edition, where things are more streamlined and easier to understand at a glance, drakes are clearly defined as a different type of being from dragons, and they fall into a more bestial category. They're essentially pony-sized dragons with no sentience, breath weapons, or wings. Picture dumb, wingless dragons with the basic body structure of a wolf. They first appeared in Hoard of the Dragon Queen in 5th edition, but got a reprint with some lore and variants in Volo's Guide to Monsters. But whereas previous editions had them as a wide variety of wild and free lesser dragons, 5th edition has thrown out the variety and streamlined their origins. Volo's classifies them as minimalistic creatures made from horrible rituals that use dragon scales, so they technically fit the criteria to be considered a monstrosity-type creature, but, dragons get special love from the game designers, so they're technically dragons. This ritual to make them was originally discovered by the cult of Tiamat in Hoard of the Dragon Queen. But anyone with enough knowledge of arcana and dragons can replicate the spells given enough time and resources. Those resources are an iron cauldron, a huge pile of fresh meat, and 10 pounds of fresh dragon scales that are donated by a dragon. It's strongly implied that the ritual will fail if the dragon doesn't willingly bless you with a gift of their scales.
Interesting.
So I have a question about that. It seems to me like a dragon wouldn't want the scales used in that way, right? Like it's creating a lesser version of them. Like it seems like a dragon's pride would want to prevent them from allowing it to happen.
Unless they're trying to get their cult more power. All right. These things are more powerful than the average person. So they're really good sentries and guards. I'm going to get into that in a sec. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so does it need to be willingly given for the intended purpose? Are you seeing what I'm getting? Dragons are hard to deceive.
I think if you're going to get 10 pounds of fresh dragon scales.
Well, how many scales is that from, say, an ancient dragon? At the size that they are, how many would be 10 pounds? Is this...
4 or 5?
Yeah.
But, how hard is it to get those scales? Yeah, I figure they're picking them off.
It's got to be painful, right?
Yeah. So, all right, let me jump into this, because we have a little bit about the ritual.
Let's go.
Okay? When the ritual is completed, a halfling-sized egg is generated within the cauldron. And within a couple of hours, it will hatch and imprint itself upon the first thing that feeds it. It's unclear as to whether or not this pile of fresh meat is there to feed this, or that you're warping that meat to become the drake inside a dragon egg.
Mm-hmm.
Also, these scales, I feel that you need 10 pounds to be able to build a dragon egg out of the scales.
Okay.
This imprinting immediately manifests as an aggressive but obedient loyalty to the person that feeds it. It only takes roughly 20 days to become a full-grown drake that is essentially a draconic guard dog. When you think about cultists and cults of the dragon, to answer your question from before, Kyle, I feel like it is gifted to the cult leader to have a couple of super pets. If it was a fiendish cult, they would have 2 Cerberus, right, on chains. This is going to be drakes that are gifted from the dragon to say, hey, you know what, this is my influence and my presence even when I'm not here.
Okay.
It's going to be a good reminder of who you serve, right?
Yeah.
Is the dragon the one that came up with the ritual in the first place?
Spoilers for Hoard of the Dragon Queen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, now, depending on the kind of dragon that gives the scales, you'll have a different kind of drake with a different kind of body and head. Horns, frills, and crests will mimic the original dragon type, but, for the most part, they're all wingless, muscular quadrupeds with nasty teeth and powerful tails. They do have claws as well, but they don't use them for combat. Before I go any further, it's worth pointing out that the drakes I'm talking about are called guard drakes in both Hoard of the Dragon Queen and in Volo's, so you're going to find them under G and not D for dragon. Mm-hmm. But while Volo's only gives us the one kind of drake, Hoard of the Dragon Queen gives us another, called an ambush drake. In fact, you can even see the art from them on the guard drake page in Volo's. They're the green one. There's no lore or flavor given to the ambush drake in Hoard of the Dragon Queen, but there are some pretty specific abilities that give an idea that they are wilder, weaker versions of the Guard Drake. So let me look at the stats for both of them side by side as I go. Both are medium, unaligned dragons, although the artwork seems to imply that the difference between the bigger Guard Drake and the smaller Ambush Drake is akin to the difference between a wolf and a coyote. But, bigger, medium-sized. This mirrors the CR difference as well because the Guard Drake is a CR2 and the Ambush Drake is a CR half. Guard Drakes have a 14 AC compared to the Ambush Drakes' 13, but the Guard Drake has significantly higher hit points. They both have a speed of 30 feet per round and dark vision out to 60 feet, and they both understand commands in Draconic, but they can't speak it. Guard Drakes have a strength modifier 2 higher than Ambush Drakes, but Ambush Drakes have a dex modifier that's 2 higher than Guard Drakes. Guard Drakes have slightly higher con, and they both have an intelligence of 4, which is -3. Guard Drakes also have a slightly higher charisma, but Ambush Drakes have a moderate edge on wisdom. Unfortunately, neither of these differences in wisdom or charisma are enough to change the modifier, so it actually doesn't matter. Here's where things start to diverge a little more. First of all, Ambush Drakes have a +4 to perception and stealth. Guard Drakes have nothing to stealth and only half as much to perception. That makes the Ambush Drake have a better passive perception too, which is a weird detail for something you called a Guard Drake. You'd think they'd have a better ability to perceive shit.
I kind of have some thoughts on that, right? It's right in the name. So Ambush Drake, right? These are your hunters. When you know that there's something in your region that you need to track down and deal with before they find what they're looking for, you send the Ambush Drakes. The Guard Drakes are sitting there holding down the fort, so if anybody comes up, they already know you're there.
I imagine Guard Drakes more like bodyguards, right? Like
Yes.
they are there listening to the commands of whoever owns them, right? Whoever
They're like
bond-
junkyard dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the Ambush Drake,
It's wolves.
they're guarding your treasure, right? They are the ones.
I'm not sure they're guarding treasure because, let me get into it. They actually have more additional features that the Guard Drakes don't have.
Okay.
They have Pack Tactics, which gives them advantage on attack rolls against targets that are adjacent to an ally of the Ambush Drake.
Again, that gives me hunter vibes.
And they also get a surprise attack, which means that if they attack before their target in round 1, they can do an additional 2d6 damage on a hit. So why does the Guard Drake get a CR2 and the Ambush Drake get a CR half? Because the Guard Drake has better armor class, significantly more hit points, better physical stats for fighting, and a multi-attack, which the Ambush Drake does not get. They only get 1 attack per turn. So now we kind of definitely have that idea of these pack hunters that are out there. I'm thinking of Ramsay Bolton hunting down the girls in Game of Thrones, sending the hounds out as a group, except the Ambush Drakes go out and do it stealthily.
Yes,
right?
correct.
So they do feel more feral. And I feel like they would be out in the world more and away from people. I feel like sometimes Ambush Drakes just don't come back.
I've actually utilized them within a dragon's territory.
Yeah.
But again, they're free roaming within that territory, right? They have had the freedom to go wherever they wanted, and they were hunting anything that came within the dragon's territory that would pose a threat.
Yeah, you let them free on your land.
Correct.
Whereas the Guard Drakes, they have the doghouse outside of your castle, right? When the Guard Drake attacks, it makes 2 attacks. One with its bite, one with its tail. They're both +5 to hit, 5-foot reach, and target 1 creature, but the bite does 1d8 +3, and the tail does 1d6 +3, piercing and bludgeoning respectively. The Ambush Drake only gets 1 bite attack and only does 1d6 +3 piercing. They are lesser threats.
Yeah. I still think they should have a higher CR rating though. Because that sneak attack plus the pack tactics, that's a pretty deadly combo.
I mean, you're going to be combining these with environmental effects and regional. Like, you're going to be using these in an environment where they're comfortable.
Well, you have to keep in mind, too, that the CR rating is based on the single creature by itself. So it doesn't take pack tactics into consideration on this, right? And you're right. A CR half is sketchy because that additional 2d6 on that surprise attack, that will kill a level 1 character. It will kill a level 2 character, right?
You can knock your sorcerer or your wizard out round 1.
Which is why I feel like these guys are supposed to come in packs where there's supposed to be 6 or 8 of them. And your party is supposed to be level 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. So that they can get ambushed and then stand up and fight, right?
I like the idea of using both of them together. Like your party gets into a fight with the guard drake first. And then, a couple rounds in, that's when the ambush drakes come in.
But
Remember,
remember,
says round 1.
Yeah,
I guess that doesn't do any sneak attack.
Is it there? Does it differentiate between their combat round 1 or just a general combat round 1?
the way that surprise works
Yeah.
in 5th edition is it's round 1 in initiative. So initiative is rolled all at once. Anything coming in part way technically doesn't count. I call bullshit.
Yeah.
And when because I will throw waves of enemies at players. So you're fighting 5-foot soldiers, 3 go down, the next 5 join the
They
battlefield.
step up.
Right. And so you never got out of initiative. These guys just rolled in at a later round. This is round 1. If there's an assassin among them, they might be able to get the drop on you. But I'm also going to be rolling stealth the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And if they fail their stealth in rounds 1, 2, 3, or 4
Before they come into combat. Yeah.
against your passive perception, then they're there. They lose their surprise, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in combat, your perception is going to be up anyway. You're looking for danger, right? So it makes sense.
Exactly. Although, I mean, you could make an argument that your perception's down because you're highly focused on something directly in front of you.
Yeah.
It depends on the environment. It depends who you're fighting too. If you're fighting an ooze, you're going to hear the click-clack of claws on the stone behind you. Yeah. If you're fighting guys in suits of armor, you're not going to hear anything except the clanging of metal, right? Mm. So anyone following along with the books is going to notice that I left out one ability for the ambush drake, and that's because I've got a theory about it, which I'll get to in a second, so bear with me. In Volos, there are variant drakes listed based upon the 5 chromatic kinds of dragons. I mean, I guess you could make a metallic drake, but the ritual is clearly evil, and it originates from Tiamat's cult, so I feel like in the Forgotten Realms, you're only going to find chromatic drakes.
I think that's fair. That was my feeling on it too.
Each of the 5 drakes gets abilities based on the color of the dragon they're spawned from. So black drakes are amphibious, which means they can breathe both air and water, and they get resistant to acid damage and a 30-foot swimming speed. Blue drakes can burrow 20 feet and get lightning resistance. Red drakes get a climb speed of 30 feet and fire resistance. White drakes get both a burrow speed of 20 feet and a climb speed of 30 feet, and, unsurprisingly, if you know the pattern, a resistance to cold damage.
Mm-hmm.
Now green drakes. Green drakes are amphibious, and they get a swim speed of 30 feet, like the black drakes, but they get a resistance to poison instead of acid, and this is where my theory comes around. In Horde of the Dragon Queen, ambush drakes get a resistance to poison damage. They are also drawn to be the color green, and their features are generally similar to a green dragon's. My theory is that ambush drakes also get variant options that never made it into the final publication. It would appear that for these variants, only the resistances are added, not the movement speed or ability to breathe underwater that some of the guard drakes may get. Now, there is nothing in the lore and no reprint in Volos, so I only have the theory, but in my campaigns, that's how I'm going to run them, right? Yeah. Ambush drakes get resistances based on the color. Guard drakes get resistances and environmental advantages, which kind of leads into what you were saying before about being free in the area around the dragon.
Now, it's been a while since I've read Horde of the Dragon Queen. Is that purely based on where it fell in the story, that they were specifically related to a green dragon?
I sat down and I would love to have a Control-F search function in the books, because it's clearly in the monster stats at the end of the book. I got the Tyranny of Dragons book, which compiled the both of them together. So I flipped through hundreds of pages and could not find where the ambush drakes actually came in. I know they're in there somewhere, but I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. So,
all right.
I wonder if ambush drakes are like offspring of guard drakes.
The offspring?
Yeah, like a bastardized version of a bastardized version.
Oh, you think so? When you photocopy something too often, it becomes a lesser. That's why they come.
They just ran out of toner halfway through.
So, do you guys have a good idea now of what drakes are like?
Yeah, I think that pretty well lays them out.
Okay, so let's jump into it. I know that we're not really going to have a whole lot in the way of social encounters, just right off the top, because these guys don't speak.
Yeah.
Right? They can understand Draconic, but they don't speak it, right? They don't have the intelligence to do it. But let's roll initiative, because I have a couple of questions.
Adam knocked me into a 19. Thanks, Adam.
Number 3 again.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Welcome, Kyle, to the Guild House, where you will always go last. All right. So, Brad, environment or social?
These things are environment. Both.
Yeah.
So I kind of discussed a little bit, ambush drakes I see very much as environmental threats,
Yes.
right? These are things that the dragon or the cult have released in the area to defend the region that belongs to the dragon.
I feel almost like they are what the bad guys in the Jurassic World franchise tried to do with the Velociraptors. We're going to weaponize them, right?
Yeah.
They've weaponized ambush.
Exactly. And that's what they're for, right? Whereas, again, these things, I mean, they are going to be an environmental, even guard drakes, I think, are going to be environmental because in and of themselves, they're not intelligent. They don't communicate. You're not really going to have a social encounter with them. However, you could very easily have a social encounter with their handlers.
Yeah.
Now, you discussed in the description that they imprint on the person who first fed them. What happens when you kill that person?
Oh, I think they go nuts. Right. I
Like,
think
even if there's other cultists around, I don't think they imprint on the next one, or
well, remember they're hyper aggressive.
yeah,
I think at that point they're just feral.
yeah,
And the cultists would probably just let them loose out into the world.
yeah.
They wouldn't kill them because it's a gift from
you
the dragon.
You would be
right?
screwed if you killed your
Yeah.
dragon's pet.
So-
But
So, yeah, it's not clear. I think that you could probably get a social encounter out of one of these things if
you're
you're
the first
guys.
one.
Yeah, if you're the guys that actually like
if you can
feed it.
ambush it in the middle of the creation of this thing, right? This thing or this egg is waiting to hatch. You kill the cultists that are there, and the first person there gives it some meat.
Look,
Boom, you've got one that's imprinted on you.
there are three kinds of cults in D&D that we see over and over and over again, and we should see more, but the main three are Draconic, Elemental, or Fiendish cults. Those are the three that we get. If it's a Draconic cult, your player should just run across an egg in a cauldron
Mm-hmm.
beside a pile of rotting meat.
You think they're going to leave it unattended? Or something happens.
Yeah, whoever it was got called away,
Yeah.
right? And the egg hasn't hatched yet. If they go over to interact with it, it will rouse the drake inside, and now they've got this creature, right? They may feed it, at which point now they got a pet. I mean, a very angry pet, but they get a pet.
Okay, so the issue I have with that is, what is the dragon's role to the drake, right? Like, will it have telepathy with the drake? Will the drake know that it is essentially serving this master, its creator?
There's nothing.
No, there's
in
not. The drake is. It's just like
It's a
like a
beast.
Chihuahua is not going to be able to say, "Oh, hey, I'm from wolves."
Yeah.
Therefore, I will bow down and follow the wolves, right? There might be an alpha kind of feel
Mhm.
to it, right?
I'm sure a dragon could command a drake just through being the bigger, tougher.
Yeah, just by roaring loudly enough, the drake will put its tail between his legs and submit to it.
Yeah,
But
okay.
I don't think that it's going to be a ally. And honestly, they're lesser dragons, and dragons have egos,
Yeah.
right? The drakes serve a purpose, but eventually, I mean, they are just going to be food.
Mhm.
Yeah. The dragon doesn't really care whether the drake lives or dies of any sort of attachment, right? Unless it has a purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
So, battle tactics.
So I've actually thrown these as a party a few times. So the ambush drake I used again as a hunt. They were a hunting pack,
Yeah.
right? So I think I threw 4 of them. And they weren't meant to be a deadly encounter, but I threw 4 of them at a level 4 party.
I feel like this is just really early in the adventuring day, just
Correct.
to whittle away a couple of resources and make them use up health.
I used it to let them know that they were in dragon territory,
Yep.
right? To make it clear. Like they came into a swamp for, it was a black dragon. But again, I played them as black drakes.
Sure.
So they had the resistance and everything. The way that you talked about homebrewing it,
Yeah.
I did that.
Okay.
So again, use them. They were a hunting pack. That the whole purpose, as I described. And then they did come in further, and that's when they came upon the cultist, who literally on chains had 2 black guard drakes.
Okay.
I have 2 ideas for how I would use them, and one of them is evil. But
Yeah,
I like it.
hey,
Oh,
we
that's
like
good.
the evil.
Go
Yeah,
for
that's
it.
good.
So one, I like the idea of using guard and ambush drakes together. I like the idea of fighting a guard drake. Like, let's say you are entering the main chamber for the cultist, right? And the guard drakes attack you first, defending the cultists, and then as you're mid-combat, that's when the ambush drakes come in and hit you from behind. I would homebrew it and still be able to use the sneak attack. And the second way is I would leave the ambush drakes until the very end. Like, you are done. You are going to the Dragon's Horde. You just finished the BBEG battle. You walk in, and there's like a chest in the middle of the room. Everybody's going, oh, it's a mimic, right?
Yeah.
But no, the room is full. It's got like 5 ambush drakes. Like, there's one hanging from the chandelier, and then there's 4 in all
Like
the
they're hiding
corners.
behind pillars and
Yeah.
shit. And
Yeah,
like,
right? So you
ready to
haven't,
pounce.
your party hasn't taken the long rest yet,
Mhm.
and they go in and just bam.
I am going to see ambush drakes interest me more.
Yeah.
Whenever the party sets up the NPC to keep watch overnight, they're going to come out to blood smears and ambush drake prints moving away, right? So these things are going to be super deadly. I'm also going to, this is just me, I'm rolling their initiative with advantage. There's no point in having ambush drakes if they're not going to get the
Yes,
ambush,
agreed.
Mhm.
right? So I'm still going to make it a roll, so the rogue isn't going to get caught off guard.
Yeah.
But I want them to be able to get the drop on pretty much everybody else. Guard drakes, I really, really like guard drakes, and I don't know why. There's nothing unique or special besides pile of hit points. Here they are.
The
But-
flavor of them is there, though.
Yeah, I like the aggression factor of them, and I would love to give a guard drake to a level 8 party as a pet.
Hmm.
Right? It's not powerful enough to make a difference, but it's beefy enough to last a round or two. And hyper aggression means that your barbarian, your dragonborn barbarian that has one on a chain, right? And
Yeah.
names them Fluffy, right?
Love that.
And is sick 'em and just lets go of the chain and off it goes, right?
Yeah.
This is how you keep the goblin merchant in line, is
Mhm.
just by having the guard drake inches from his face snapping his jaws, right?
Just drool, hot breath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at that point, I would give, advantage on intimidation rolls.
Absolutely.
Shit like that, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I'd run these guys for.
What are you doing? You gotta go into the city. There's no way anybody's letting that thing in city limits.
Man, honestly, it depends on your freaking city. I would totally bring it into Baldur's Gate.
Well, yeah, fair.
All right. And if you're up north, if you're in Icewind Dale or
Yeah.
even Neverwinter, which are kind of like on the fringes of society, sure, I do that. But it's not going into to Waterdeep.
No.
And most small
towns aren't gonna let anything like that in.
no
Not that they're gonna be able to stop you.
even
Yeah.
Candlekeep is going to say, okay, look, you leave it outside, or we'll chain it up inside the walls, away
Mhm.
from everyone else, and it's your job to feed this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone's gonna be watching it at all times from your crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna just let it wander the city.
The other thing about guard drakes too is they do say over and over and over again the word aggressive,
Yep.
which means that I don't think a guard drake will ever retreat, but an ambush drake would.
Yes.
Yeah.
So even like a guard drake will fight to the very end, no matter what. Do you guys have any plot hooks for a side quest or one shot or main story arc for these guys? Because they don't really feel like they deserve.
Like you said, the closest that you would get is giving it to the party as a
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
they're henchmen at best, and random encounters at worst.
you
right?
mentioned right finding the egg. That's kind of your plot hook.
Yeah.
Right. So the drake itself isn't the plot hook. It's the egg of the drake that gives you the potential for a plot hook.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so are there any final thoughts before we wrap the episode up?
Love these creatures is about all I can say.
Yeah.
There's so much potential in this, and you've got 2 very different types. We discussed it earlier, but you've got your social, your environmental encounter in your Pseudodragon, your Faerie Dragon, and then you have very much the opposite in the Drake.
Yes, I really want there to be more kinds of drakes. There are dozens of them in previous editions, and we got 1.5 in 5th edition so far. So I know that they've done the Dragon campaign and the published material. I know we've got Feywild coming, and freaking Magic the Gathering stuff is around the corner, which I'm excited for actually. But I want there to be more dragons in Dungeons and
I was
Dragons.
surprised they didn't give you something in Mythic Odyssey.
Well, they gave us,
Doesn't Theros, right?
Yeah, but it was all Hydra.
It
Hydra,
was.
Hydra, right? So, and that kind of makes a certain amount of sense. I'm ready for there to be more kinds of drakes. They should have had a Frost Drake in the Dragon
they
of
should have.
Icefire Peak, right? Like, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Kyle, any final thoughts on these cousins of dragons?
I thought they were pretty interesting. I really like the Faerie Dragon. I think it's got a lot of fun potential, and it plays very differently from all the other ones,
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, that's it for this discussion on draconic creatures for now. We've got a lot more ground to cover with dragons as we move forward, so subscribe or follow and check back regularly to see what inspirations and insights we'll have for you in the future. Next week, we will be heading to the kind of a campaign setting, kind of adjacent to the Forgotten Realms, very confusing, multiple different subsections and tiny domains that may or may not be part of the Shadowfell. Look, we're going to Ravenloft, and we're going to bust it all open for you there.
Boy.
So it's a lot to unpack, so make sure you tune in next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, www.itsamimic.com, as well as a store for some awesome merch. We also rely on word of mouth to get the news of the podcast out there to the community, so please pass the word to everyone you know that we're available on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as most podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
Thank you for listening to another It's a Mimic production. Inquiries, shoutouts, requests, and mailbag questions can be sent to info@itsamimic.com.
Okay, so in the regular dragon episodes, we talk a lot about dragon eggs because they're not often included in 5th edition. Do you guys have any thoughts about what your dragon egg would be for your creature that you covered? The Pseudodragon or the Faerie Dragon or anything? What it would look like? Or let's grab dice.
You want to roll for this one?
Yeah. You got a 9?
17.
6.
Well, you are going last, Kyle.
And I get to go first. What a turn of events.
So,
I picture for the Pseudodragon, Cadbury mini egg.
fuck. God damn it. Okay, why? Not actually made of chocolate, I hope?
No, not actually made of chocolate, but I'm picturing kind of, a bright pastel sort of color, a smooth finish.
Yeah.
Creamy center.
Yeah, of course. And you crunch into it, you get kind of, it's like a delicacy, right?
Mm.
Like you get the 1,000-year-old century egg. Imagine that.
I would rather not. Thank you.
1,000-year-old century. Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I actually got a little bit of lore. Like I said earlier, the drakes actually come from, specifically it says in the lore, halfling-sized eggs. They're very specific that it's halflings, which is very strange. But I guess because it's based on which kind of chromatic dragon it is, of course it'll be different colors. And
Yeah.
if you go back and listen to the dragon episodes, you'll hear us wax poetic about what those drags should, or those dragon eggs, not the dregs, should look like, and like different effects that you might have when you touch them or be around them. I would have that to a much lesser degree for the drakes.
Yeah, they're not
Right.
as magical, right?
No,
So, makes sense.
For me, since it's a fairy, I would imagine they're small, like
Kinder Surprise.
Yeah, like a hummingbird egg. Like
Oh, yeah.
bright
Yeah.
blue, speckled, really pretty kind of thing. They only get up to like 1.5 meters, 2 meters. So I just imagine like a little tiny egg.
What's the first color for a fairy dragon? Do you know?
Red.
Red. Yeah, that's right. You said red. Should they be red instead of blue, or should they be, what was the last color? Violet?
Yeah, violet or indigo. Yes, violet.
I was going off my Roy G. Biv for
Yeah.
that. So, yeah. So, should they be red or violet?
Maybe all the colors of the rainbow.
Does it change colors over the cycle of the egg?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I like that too.
I don't know. I like it. Does it sparkle?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for listening. Bye.